word on what to expect. Obtaining a gaming license often gets treated as the finish line. But as many of you may know, the real work actually begins with choosing who you partner with in the first place. Your shareholders, your management, your suppliers, the personnel you bring on board, and most of all, your advisors. Today's conversation will go beyond the mechanisms of licensing to look at how to evaluate, select, and build lasting relationship with the right partners. The kind that protects your brand, shares your vision, and grows with you over time. Joining me to discuss this today, we have Garon Weitzman, South African attorney and founding partner of Weitzman's Attorneys. Also joining is Adenike Oyebamiji, Nigerian qualified attorney and legal compliance manager, West Africa for Velex Advisory. Also on this call today is Zu Totayeva, UK qualified solicitor and founding partner, Still Rose Legal London, and also SR Global Services in Mumbai. Now, over the duration of this session, we will be covering what the right partner actually means. What does it look like beyond financial terms? What are the red flags, the challenges to watch out for? And how do we structure relationship for long-term alignment, not just short-term wins? So we'll leave time at the end of this session for audience question and answer. So please drop your questions in the chat as we go. We'll get to as many as we can, time permitting. And on that note, let's get started. I'll turn it over to Adenike here. Hi, Adenike.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. So, in your experience as a provider in the industry, what are the factors that you have seen that enhance success in market entry, especially in Africa's diverse markets, and also the most difficult challenges that operators, investors tend to face when entering these markets?
Thank you, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever we're joining from. And I think firstly, I would like to thank SLEC Africa for setting up this timely webinar. Gaming operators actually need they actually need to understand, beyond licensing what it takes to be able to make informed decisions. So in responding to your questions, so many challenges. I'm sure if we take all of it, we will not leave here today, right? In as much as Africa has numerous opportunities and potentials, it comes with a lot of challenges. Some foreign operators, I don't know if I'm audible. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Some operators, especially the foreign operators, some people see Africa as one country. Africa is one continent with 54 countries, 54 cultures, 54 customer behaviors, tax complexity, as well as numerous regulatory frameworks. So what is applicable in Kenya, of course, will be different from what is applicable in Nigeria. And so, you cannot come and, believe that what you're doing in Kenya, you would replicate in Nigeria, because it is a recipe for disaster. So let me go to some of the challenges, that we see operators are faced in my experience working in the industry. The first one is tax complexity and regulatory changes. The truth of the matter is, Africa is developing and the government is out to generate revenue. So operators should expect new taxes. For example, in Nigeria this year, the Nigerian Revenue Service introduced 5% withholding tax on winnings. In Uganda as well, the government has proposed a 30% GGR as well as a 15% withholding tax on winnings. Same as South Africa, I think the National Treasury also proposed a 20% tax on online gaming. So you should expect new taxes. You should expect license conditions updates. You should expect advertising changes in advertising rules. Like Kenya, for example, last year the government came and put a 30-day. Initially, they suspended advertisement totally, and then operators clamored and appealed, and they lifted the ban after 30 days with some limitations. For example, in Ghana as well, they have a ban on using influencers and celebrities for advertisement, same as Kenya. And if you look at Nigeria, the ACON, the Advertising Regulatory Council of Nigeria, sometime last year also introduced vetting and approval of social media adverts, which was not in place initially. So you should expect some of those changes. Another challenge is currency volatility and foreign exchange restrictions. Currency in Africa, in most jurisdictions actually fluctuates against major currencies like dollars, euros, and pounds. So if most of African operators actually utilize foreign platforms, and you have to, pay royalties monthly. And most of them, pay in foreign currencies. So these fluctuations actually affect profits. So if you look at the revenue, especially when you're paying fixed amount of money, it doesn't justify the revenue generated sometimes, and it can affect your overall profits as an operator. Also, some countries have foreign exchange restrictions in terms of repatriation of profits to outside the jurisdictions. Countries like Ghana, Nigeria, Malawi, Zimbabwe, Burundi, they have foreign exchange restrictions. Another of the challenge that people don't really talk about is local talent, hiring, and recruitment. We actually discovered there are very few experienced gaming professionals. It feels like we're all recycling the same set of employees. So this person leaves this operator, joins this operator within a year, and after a while, you just realize that, it takes a lot. You have to invest in training, and you also have to pay competitive salaries, because new entrants are also looking for experienced professionals. So at the end of the day, you're paying compensation and benefits, trying to attract and see how you can formulate employment retention strategies. We usually talk about customer retention strategies, but we hardly ever talk about employee retention strategies. So it's one of the challenges that we face. Another challenge is also payments and bank. As a continent, we have 3 different payment worlds. Some jurisdictions utilize mobile money. Some jurisdictions utilize the bank and the wallet hybrid system. Some jurisdictions utilize cards. So, for example, in Kenya and Tanzania, they utilize M-Pesa. In Ghana and I think Uganda, yes, they utilize MTN Mobile Money and Airtel Tigo. Why this is totally different from Nigeria that utilizes wallet systems like OPay and PalmPay and aggregators like Paystack and Flutterwave. South Africa utilizes cards and instant EFTs, established PSPs. So there are different payment worlds. So you need to find reliable payments partners. Before you even come to a jurisdiction, you need to ask yourself some certain questions. Which payment providers are reliable? Which payment methods are utilized by customers? Which payment providers make withdrawals easy? Because customers especially in Africa, they get frustrated when it's very difficult to withdraw funds, and you don't want to lose customers because of that purpose. So it's one of the challenges that they face in the jurisdiction. Regulatory changes too as well. I think for now I should stop, and then we'll pick up the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adenike. Thank you for highlighting some of the peculiarities and also the differences in the various markets, and where most market entrants or most investors, operators need to pay attention for sustainable growth and all. Now, you said quite a number of things, many of which are not documented really. You want requirements, you want to know about the payment system that exists in jurisdiction. All of this is not always, properly listed, put down, or documented, which is why we decided to talk to a very specific sector, the advisors, today. I'm coming to you, Garon, in terms of, finding local partners, building credibility. It starts with the advisors, as finding the right advisors. At what point should a business entering the African markets, any of the markets, at what point should they be looking to get their advisors? And how do they identify the right local partners, credibility in terms of navigating regulation and understanding market realities?
Thanks, Fudeki. I think as early on as possible, that's the reality of it. I think the African market is probably no different in certain ways to any other market that one is entering into. From a pure commercial perspective, and I mean, I'm a practicing attorney, I'm not a commercial advisor, but in principle, thinking about things commercially, any market that one's looking to go into, one needs to go into adequately prepared, adequately researched. One's synopses and projections based on market intelligence need to be correct, or as correct as possible. Scoping out that market entry from a commercial perspective involves a number of things, and in regulated or highly regulated industries, that has to involve a number of advisors. I think the professional advisors are the industry is probably the biggest, smallest industry in the world, in the sense that tremendous amount of revenue being generated, but after one's been in the industry for a while, the industry feels fairly small, even when one goes to ICE and there's 63,000 people over for 3 days or whatever. So to find the right advisors as a general proposition should not be an issue. Sometimes I think, and the point Adenike made about, Africa being 54 different countries, what goes on in South Africa is very, very different to what goes on in North Africa, to East Africa and West Africa, and perhaps the quality of advisors in the non-major gambling markets is not quite the same, or as in the major gambling markets in the country, and being able to access them. But to find someone who does have that reputation in the markets as a professional advisor, whether it's an accountant, whether it's a business advisor, whether it's a lawyer, I think you've got to have the right start, and that's got to be from very, very early on, because I think one can get horribly taken for a ride. I'm not sure, again, the more I've thought about, the topic as we discussed in our sort of pre-meeting, and the more I've been thinking about it for a little while, actually, before that, there's a rush for Africa now, again, in a sense of another rush for Africa, but in relation to gambling and the online industry, particularly from around the world. I'm not convinced it's any different to anywhere else. It just happens to be that you're going into multiple territories in a region. In some senses, it's like saying, well, we want to go into Europe, okay, with 20-something different territories in Europe, where there are, despite the fact that there are some harmonized laws and treaties and various things across Europe, gambling laws are generally not harmonized, albeit that there is a body of case law at the ECJ level, but they're not harmonized in terms of any EU legislation. There are material and distinct cultural differences, and we've seen that emerge in the ECJ matters out of Portugal as a very religious country, as opposed to, say, out of Germany, where the view of how you deal with gambling is different. I don't actually think Africa's that different. The reality is or South America, and the rush that there's been for South America. Brazil is distinctly different to Mexico, which is distinctly different to Peru, culturally, albeit that there may be similar languages, as a general proposition. So I think that the reality is wherever you go, including Africa, there's a possibility you could come horribly unstuck if not properly advised, and if not properly advised as early as possible on the commercial aspects, on the regulatory aspects, on tax, on, as Adenike correctly raises, issues of extraction of value, issues of financial projections, including getting the right staff who are being competed for at the moment by the same pool, or the same pool of staff is being competed for in principle and expertise by the same parties. But I think it's a business question, even more so than a thing. Can you predict something's going to change? Again, Adenike raises some various important points. Is it helpful to go and get a tax advisor because there's changes in taxes that are predicted? My view is no, not necessarily, because there may not actually be a tax angle. There's actually a regulatory and political angle to the taxes, even more so than, can you promulgate a tax in that sort of way? Again, a legal thing. But there are so many changes that one has to be properly advised. Is the change again any different to what goes on elsewhere? Well, not really. I mean, the UK has just raised its taxes to an extraordinary level with further, expectation in April next year on sports betting duty. The KSA has done the same. Many of I think Brazil's been contemplating doing so. That is the way of the world at the moment. And to say, well, if you are being advised anywhere, you need to be appropriately advised. And the rule is no different in Africa. Don't get taken in by parties who profess to be advisors. There is a group actually of well-known advisors who know what they're doing, who also learning as we go, because that's the nature of the industry, and it's novel, and despite being now 30 years old or so, but it's still relatively novel. The things that are happening are there's a tremendous state of flux, and you have to be appropriately advised as early as possible. Like getting local requirements or the local ownership requirements, which is something you mentioned in your introduction to our question, is exceptionally important, because that local flavor, it does differ per territory. In some countries, there are restrictions on foreign direct investment into the gambling industry, and you have to go through a local party. In other, and find the correct party. In an ideal world, I mean, again, I was thinking about it, everyone will know we've likely to have had a pre-call to discuss, where we are on this. And thinking about it since yesterday on our pre-call, the notion of finding the correct party when looking into Africa, my view would be, if you need a local partner, you probably would want to look at telecoms. You probably would want to look at parties that have got a substantial advertising network, maybe payment processing, something of that nature where the local party brings value to the transaction and brings value to that partnership and to what you're giving away per se in order to enter the market, rather than is there on a nominal basis. In South Africa, our rules are a little bit different. Of course, if there's an appropriate local partner, there's no reason not to have an appropriate local partnership. But we have broad-based Black economic empowerment rules, economic affirmative action rules to redress the issues that arose from the disparities that arose from apartheid. And you cannot get a gambling license in this country, or manufacture a license for that matter, to supply games, software, platforms, etc., without being compliant with the Black economic empowerment rules. Now, that can mean having a local Black partner. It could mean setting up a structure where there's a non-profit corporation or company that provides good cause contributions through and as a result of its shareholding in the licensed company. It's probably, this isn't the right forum right now to go into the complexities of that, but suffice it to say there's a local ownership requirement in a different way. You can't just go get someone off the street. That's actually a criminal offense in terms of South African law, known as fronting. But, does it actually mean you distinctly need a local sort of warm body partner? Not necessarily, in order to properly comply with the laws. But there is effectively, call it a restriction on foreign direct investment, in the sense that for a portion of the company, it needs to belong to a South African or for the benefit of a previously disadvantaged group in South Africa. So it differs from territory to territory. I say again, the reality is that there are many countries around the world that have got restrictions on foreign direct investment in relation to sensitive or critical industries. India's got a restriction on foreign direct investment in the gambling industry. I mean, in a lot of ways, you can't do business in the US in the gambling industry, or certainly as it started to develop, without a local partner, generally one of the casino groups. So it's not necessarily, when one looks at it actually objectively, a lot of what we are dealing with here, local ownership, talent pool sort of competition, local establishment, issues of rising taxes, issues of advertising restrictions or increased advertising restrictions, increased RG, increased social responsibility. All of these things are not necessarily peculiar to Africa. That's the thing. It's just that you have to deal with them too in some way, shape or form when you're coming in here, and thinking that you don't have to would be wrong. And anyone advising early on that you don't have to, and that, oh yes, we can get you a license, everything will be fine, just give us $1 million and we're good. Yeah, I wouldn't that's not the right advisor.
Right. Thank you, Garen. That's you have said quite a bit, especially just honing in on the fact that whatever market you're going into in the world, you still need advisors. So Africa is not peculiar. I'm going to come to you, Zu, because whilst you're UK based, you have had the opportunity to work in EU markets as well as African market. Now, this perspective, and I know that I'm well aware that one of the strategies you generally tend to adopt is identify and work with advisors on ground. How easy is that exercise, being somebody who's, working from, who has experience in multiple markets? How easy is it finding and identifying the right advisors, getting the right advisory for clients, especially for those clients who are interested in having cross-border structuring, but would most times insist, we just get one advisor in Africa? I think this generally comes from the perception that Africa is one big continent, but still one big country. What has your experience been in this regard, Sue?
Thank you, Olafadike, for the question. Well, the answer is interesting. The experience has been very interesting. So I've been working with Pan-African businesses in Africa for the last 7, coming up 8 years now. And one thing that I learned is that just because the advisor has a global brand that is known doesn't necessarily mean that said advisor will actually know the local gaming rules, gaming regulations. So they may be a great law firm and great advisor in every other regard, or Big Four. But when it comes to gaming, they are not necessarily the best advisors within our sector that we work at. I learned it time and time again. And the amount of times I had to tell my client, just because you get CMS Navarro in Kenya, that you're going to get the right advice. You're better off actually instructing good local expert boutique firm that specializes in gaming and related industries, and they'll give you much better quality advice. The challenging part of it is that it's difficult to find those advisors because there isn't one centralized sort of list of those advisors, and Legal 500 or similar advisory directories or guidance, they don't really cover niche advisors from Africa. They all still sort of keep promoting and keep mentioning same big firms and same big names that then you come to them and the quality of the advice is just not good enough. And I will bring you specific examples why. Oftentimes, if you're a legal advisor, and particularly from a big name, you're quite arrogant. So you come in and you think, okay, this is just gaming. I'll open the law, I'll read it, I'll interpret it, I'll give my legal advice. But that's not how it works. You mentioned, Fadike, when you were addressing a question to Garen, you said, but there's lots of written and unwritten requirements. And that's exactly is the biggest challenge that Africa has. There are written requirements, and some jurisdictions are a bit more mature within the gaming industry, like South Africa, and they will have everything written, everything is publicly available, and the advice, it's easier for advisors to interpret it. But there are jurisdictions where online you may have an act that since has been updated twice, but that information is not readily available. You have to call the regulator and obtain it. There'll be nuances that are not written anywhere in the legislation, like requirements to have a local shareholder or local director. But unless you have that requirement, you meet that requirement, you will not get your local license. And unless you have a strong local advisor that lives and breathes that legislation, you're not going to get a quality advice. You end up spending hundreds and thousands of dollars and not getting the license locally or the result that you want. So the amount of time I told the clients that don't go for a big name, go for a niche household name that really understands the gaming industry in Africa. I mean, I'd be a rich woman by now. Just to add to other point that one of the colleagues mentioned just now on the call, I mean, it is logical that Africa has all the same requirements, just like European Union, right? Like any reasonable person would assume that. And as you guys keep mentioning that Africa is seen as one country rather than the continent, and I keep thinking about it. Why is it happening? I believe it's because it's not correctly represented in the mainstream media in the Western world. The Western world has its own idea about Africa from movies and whatever they've seen, and that's it. Mm-hmm. And they don't really get into the rich culture that Nigeria has, the rich culture that Mozambique has, very different to Nigeria. And because of that, there is a stereotype in the Western mind and the arrogance that we know Africa, and they come in, we know the product, we made it in UK, so we're gonna make it in Nigeria. Okay, that's not gonna fly. And another mistake that I keep saying is not hiring local strong teams and trying to centralize decision making in the Western hemisphere rather than decentralizing and running each country separately. Again, I mean, we're not commercial advisors, but we see time and time again, because we advise various gaming companies, and a lot of the clients that I advise is Pan-African businesses. So that's another, the second sort of big misconception that international gaming companies have about Africa. The third one I would say is stemming from what Garen was mentioning, is that you can't just go along to every sort of advisor that tells you I can get you a license and that's it, just send me $1 million. There's so many nuances. First one being the correct structure. Like, if you don't structure it correctly, if you don't register your loans, if you don't put all the paperwork in time, yes, you may invest all that money and you may even get your license. But when you start making revenue, you'll not be able to get your money out of the country because you haven't met X, Y, Z, or you end up paying too much tax, which you haven't, factored in when planning. That's a segment that is another sort of misconception, is that just because you have a structure that works in the Western world, the same structure will work in Africa. There is a misunderstanding as to the type of requirements that are in Africa, which are oftentimes, yes, they're similar to what the requirements are in the Western countries that regulate gaming as well, but the requirements are often a little bit more, I would say, bureaucratic, I dare say that, more bureaucratic, because in the West, a lot of the processes have been streamlined either using technology or AI, and it's easier. And not all of the African jurisdictions have the same infrastructure yet. So a lot of it very manual, very sort of labor intense in terms of sending. So those are the factors that people that never worked in Africa don't understand. They just can't comprehend it. They either afraid of all those regulatory requirements, which I don't think they're scary. You just, if you know how to navigate as any other regulation, as any other regulated market, as Garen said, you just go in, you follow, you get your license, you operate fine. It's not knowing and not understanding, which for me is weird. I don't know, maybe it's because of all the algorithms, like the way the Instagram, TikTok and everything works, because I read somewhere in the statistics that by 2035, every third user on internet will be an African. So to not understand an African continent, for me, is missing out not just on the gaming industry opportunity, but also on the variety of other opportunities that this continent offers. But I think it will start to change very soon as the cultures I can see emerging. And when I say cultures, I mean distinct cultures. So the African fashion culture is now getting very popular in the Western world. That there is a Kenyan culture in the pottery, which I didn't know about, but apparently it's a big thing. So those are those kind of cultural spillage into the Western world that educates them who they are and the distinction between the countries. That will also help every possible industry in every country on the continent to understand the culture and how to work with it. So. Yes.
Thank you so much, Sue. Thank you. In fact, you have touched on very, very key points, and thank you for clarifying, why the West generally thinks Africa is just one country, one continent is still the same thing, without understanding the differences. But yes, you're right. I mean, now people are beginning to realize that, okay, Africa is not a country, it's a continent, 54 different countries. And yes, we're grateful to technology for that. Now, off the back of some of the things you've said, I'm going to come to Adenike. I'm going back to Adenike. Adenike, I mean, being African, talk to me. Many African jurisdictions have localized local content requirement, right? Which is sometimes documented, in other jurisdictions not documented. But there is a general resistance to, identifying or even having local content in businesses, in some of this gaming business, in the corporate structuring of this business. There has been instances where people have opted to choose partners that just fulfill the basic requirement of, give us your name, give us your ID, just give us your localness, for lack of a better expression. Why do you think this is the case? And then what do you think such businesses are missing by not having local content or not having a proper strategy around choosing who their local representatives or local shareholder or directors are, and what should such businesses be watching out for? So yes, over to you. Adenike, are you still here?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, clearly now.
Okay. Many foreign operators, usually want to enter the African markets, with some kind of probably knowledge in terms. Let me give an example. Like Nigeria, the internet gives the notion of, there's fraud, we are fraudulent and the likes. And so they are kind of taken aback when you tell them, there's the minimum requirements that Lagos, has, like 15%, and they tell you, I don't trust anybody, I don't know, who to work with and whatnot. The truth is, getting local partners is very, very important, and it also helps with the success of your business. But now it's finding the right and reliable partners that matters. You don't just get anybody and put on record as your nominee shareholder or your nominee director. sector and say, oh, let me just tick the compliance box. The truth of the matter is, when you find the right partners, they help you, for example, understand how regulations work in practice. When you have a partner that, is part of your business and understands how gaming works in the jurisdictions, they are able to tell you, oh, this is what's going on within the jurisdiction right now. But in practice, it's something different. For example, in Nigeria, I did mention that, the Nigerian Revenue Service introduced the withholding tax, 5% withholding tax on winnings this year. But if you look at Lagos State, for example, the LRS has, agreed on implementation. The withholding tax on winnings should be less losses before you remit the tax. So sometimes having a reliable partner, somebody that understands how the jurisdiction works, is able to help you, understand how regulation works in practice. Sometimes the regulation is even silent. The law will tell you something, sometimes it's totally different in practice. And then another important aspect is they help you find the right partners. When you have somebody that, is very knowledgeable, has local knowledge, you work with multiple partners when you enter a market. You're working with the payment providers, you're working with bank, you're working with market agencies, sometimes tax consultants. But when you have a partner who is part of your business and is interested in the success and growth of your organization, they can tell you, oh, these are the right partners to work with. These are the partners who are reliable. They can also put you, direct you the right way to go. Another important aspect is they help you anticipate regulatory changes. When you have a good partner that you're working with who understands how the market operates, and has strong relationship with, for example, the regulators, they can let you know ahead, these are the regulatory developments that is happening really soon, and you can have enough time to prepare. And sometimes we also advise gaming operators to be flexible, have operational flexibilities so that you are able to adapt quickly with the new laws and the changes that's going on. And then you did ask another question, how to identify genuine partners. A lot of people call themselves consultants, label themselves as experts in the field, but you need to ask certain questions. Number one, when they come to you and then you're engaging with them, they give you information. At least within the first few months, you can try and, verify some of the information. Some information are publicly available. Some you can reach out to some other people to try and verify, or even the regulators, to verify the information that you're giving. And then you have to also be cautious of experts that tell you, oh, there's guaranteed success. Just come in. There are no operational challenges. The truth is, there's no market that doesn't have its challenge. And aside gaming, there's no industry that doesn't have its challenges. So when engaging the right partners, you need to find the partners that can tell you can be honest, and tell you the practical realities of operating in that market. They can tell you the challenges and also profess solutions. As much as Africa has potentials, it also has some of the pitfalls. So they can help you with navigating compliance pitfalls as well. You can also conduct due diligence. When they tell you, oh, these are the partners I've worked with, you can maybe reach out to some of them to find out probably if they worked with them and what's the success story. The operators that they've helped to enter the market, are they still operating today? What is their success story? Did they launch? Because some people will get licensed and did not eventually launch business. So it's one of those things you need to highlight. For example, there's someone within the industry that, I know an operator engaged on the basis that he's a legal practitioner and he's not even a lawyer. Do you understand? For Pan-African operations. But if they are conducted due diligence or requested for qualifications, there are some instances like professional bodies, you can request for qualifying certificates just to be certain that, okay, this is who you're saying you are. And as much as we're talking about partners also extend to someone leading your organization, more like a country manager, someone that has hold managerial position in your organization. The same measure you use to search for the right partners, you should also use the same measure to search for such persons, because they also engage with you on, what's going on within the industry, what's going on in practice, and you have to be sure that you're working with the right people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adenike. Thank you. that was, very well put, identifying what the challenges are. And again, also pointing out that there is work to be done. It's not just about finding a name, to fulfill, to check the requirement for local content. Find parties that bring value and do your due diligence. Ensure you have a strategy. Those who have knowledge of the market, regulatory engagement, who can properly represent, and also feel like they have a stake in the market. I know that one of the key, feedback that we have heard is, why we're just giving, it's more or less like we're giving out 15%. I'm sure it's the same feeling in South Africa too, where it is mandatory that you must have an African, and not just an African, but a Black person, as part of the team. They just feel like they don't bring any value to the table, but you can actually do the work of finding partners who actually bring value to the business and to the table. Again, just riding off of the back of local content, I'm coming to Garon with the issue of localization and centralization of key functions of the corporate structure of the organization, the management, the reporting structure as well. We find a lot of businesses, especially those who have Pan-African, who have existence in multiple African countries, and also perhaps in Europe, mostly in Europe, they always want to maintain the kind of structure where the key functions, key personnel are centralized and they sit out of jurisdiction. How does this ultimately affect performance of the business? And, when is this the right strategy to adopt, and when is not the right strategy to adopt?
I think there are a few things. I think, let's deal with the corporate structuring side first, in the sense of the pure corporate structuring. I think one has to obviously be advised by the appropriate parties and led by the appropriate parties. Some of it will be tax driven, some of it's going to be efficiency driven, some of it's going to be a little bit of both, in the sense of being able to extract as much value on a pre-tax basis on intra-group arrangements, that satisfy transfer pricing rules and that, across jurisdictions. So there is a matter of where these two sort of converge, really. I mean, if we take a sort of step back, the reality is the more people you have in the market actually working the market itself with local market knowledge, the better, in my view. You can't replace local market knowledge when you are targeting a market from far away. By the same token, I mean, one has to, there are different jurisdictions. In South Africa, for example, and obviously I'm here, so my greatest knowledge on the African side, at least, is on South Africa. South Africa has a substantial history in online gambling on a global basis, because much of the early days of the industry, there were many companies here involved already at that stage on international marketing, international finance, international advertising for global online gambling companies. So there's a tremendous amount of expertise here. And when it sort of came time to, when South Africa started growing, whilst those parties were not necessarily part of the South African gaming industry, they were often persons who were already in the industry, but their general knowledge coming into the industry was marketing in South Africa, advertising, and they would be able to catch up really, really quickly on issues and bring in additional resources. So that wasn't a problem. It may not be quite the case in other African territories, because, the developed expertise hasn't necessarily been there for about 30 years. So you've got to distinguish between the two. But my general suggestion would be key functionalities dealing, say, for example, with payment processes in country, and having a team that deals with processing and money's in, money's out, and that in country, CRM stuff, in country, particularly where there is a language related issue, so Lusophone, Francophone Africa. But I suppose, anywhere in Africa, people speak not, even though the lingua franca these days appears to be largely English and certain language of business, the reality is people speak multiple languages, often a mixture of English and something else on a day-to-day basis. I think that localization aspect is really important, having people on the ground in that regard. But centralizing your core functions, your global finance functions, perhaps your global legal functions, and being able to coordinate with the local markets and parties in those markets, that's probably the way to do it. I certainly act for a lot of multinationals. You do see it all the time amongst the multinationals. They are often going, hell, that didn't sort of work. We need someone, back in country, or we can actually rationalize this by taking it out of country and having that resource on an international basis. So much depends really on the groups, how well they are run, how streamlined they can be, and what essential functions they see are necessary in country. Almost certainly the commercial functions have to be coordinated in country, a large portion of those. Does legal need to have a local legal in-house counsel? Not necessarily, especially if you've got solid outside counsel in that jurisdiction who's working with a sort of general counsel on a global basis, but almost certainly call it compliance and regulatory on a day-to-day basis. I think it's useful to have someone in-house locally. The CRM teams, of course. What else? As I said, some degree of payment and finance. You've got to understand how the local payment systems work, the banks work. You can't necessarily say someone who comes from a European banking and payment processing sort of experience sitting in London or sitting in Malta will have the first clue about how to deal with stuff in Ghana. Or, I get questions about Burkina Faso, Benin, so not called it Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, the kind of usual suspects on a developed market, or perhaps even Botswana to some degree these days. But, it goes further than that. People are trading and have licenses, international companies or international shareholders in, DRC, the Congo, Cote d'Ivoire, in so many places. And I think that, having as much local knowledge as possible, yes, but that also does it's a fine balance, say, between, call it the tax structuring, extraction of value structuring, and commercial and corporate efficacy when it comes to actually generation of revenue.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Garon. Thank you. I think to sum that up, your investment in Africa, your business in Africa, any of the African countries should not be structured in a way that they become just cost centers, and they're paying for your extracting from your local operation, higher fees, different payment structure for personnel that is not based locally. Ultimately, what you then find is that it's difficult for the local business to be profitable because it's carrying so much operating expenses. Thank you for that. I'm going to come to Zhu shortly. There are a few questions. I see the questions. I'll take the questions. But I want to come to you very quickly, Zhu, just to talk about technology, and technology providers coming onto the African country, a bit about AI as well. We've been talking about service providers and we're talking about the world evolving and all of that. And of course, now for many businesses or many individuals, they have access to all of this technology that can do a lot of the work that many of us as advisors do. So what role, to what extent should there be reliance on AI by operators in doing their market research, in planning their strategy, as opposed to relying on advisors who know the market?
Yeah. Well, I mean, AI revolution is a huge wave that is drowning currently Europe, US, Asia. I'm not sure about Africa, but I'm just speaking from my experience in London. Everybody's hot topic right now is AI in the legal industry, AI in every industry, and that all lawyers in UK will be replaced with AI in the next 2 to 3 years. Certainly the junior to mid-level associates. I myself use AI a lot. My law firm uses one of the top AI subscriptions as well, and it's a great benefit. Obviously, you can't go against technology and innovation. You're just going to fall behind. It's a great tool. It produces draft contracts to the same level as a really good senior junior type level, and it's never tired, never on holiday, never on leave, never has emotional outbursts. It's there, it's reliable. So more and more of our clients, including the gaming industry, they would come to us with the draft term sheet, with the draft shareholders agreement, with the ready-made draft, and like, oh, just review it. It shouldn't take that much time, and give us your comments. It shouldn't cost that much. And the reality of it is, I'll be very honest, the drafts are not that bad. And yes, obviously the 80% of the work is done. We add the value add of 20%, and you see a haircut in our legal revenue happening because we charge our rates, and you have to charge what you actually have incurred. Now the challenge though occurs more, and I genuinely believe it's because the mapping out of the AI and the LLMs, large language models, it's based on the Western hemisphere knowledge and Western available, whatever you can get from the Google search essentially. And the knowledge, the research that clients come to us with, it's really bad. So that's the area where they don't know Africa, and the LLMs are way far away from fully comprehending, particularly in the niche industry as gaming. It makes a lot of mistakes. The research produced by the LLMs, it doesn't have the accurate, reliable information. I see a lot of issues. Obviously, there are other more reliable technologies within the gaming industry. They also have information on Africa, like Vixio. They're more accurate, but I've spotted a few mistakes in there as well. And it all stems from the fact that, as I mentioned, not all the information is documented. There are certain requirements that are not expressly outlined in the legislation itself, but it's a practice that is adopted by certain countries, and you either know it or you don't. It depends on the advisor that you get. And coming back to the AI and all the technology, I think it's going to catch up. The wave will get to Africa as well, but it will take, I think, 5 to 6 years for the knowledge to be mapped out in Africa, and for it to be fed to the LLMs, for it to be super accurate. I mean, it makes silly mistakes, like on the double tax treaty research that I got from one of my juniors, just to give you an example. It was talking about one of the double tax treaties with an African country that have allegedly been cancelled. I nearly dropped off the floor because I do like entire mapping out, and I rely on the draft. And I was like, how did I even hear about this? I said, where did you get this from? And my junior was like, well, I got it from the AI. Like, can you get to the source? We started getting to the source, and it was relying on some random article from a random website about the African continent, and it was incorrect. We had to call the tax authority in Africa for the said country, was specifically Kenya actually, to verify, and they said no, it's still intact. There were rumors that we're going to terminate and suspend the double tax treaty with the Western European country, but it didn't happen. So it just shows that there are those hallucinations and inaccuracies. But I think we're not far off from when it will be updated. I know that there are companies from US like Meridian, they hiring experts from each jurisdiction on various experts within the legal industry, trying to map out the knowledge and get the knowledge to feed it to LLM to make it more accurate. So it is definitely coming. I also wanted to quickly add, Olafide, if I may, to what Garen was mentioning as to understanding the local partners. It's also important to know and be able to locate correct local partners in the West as well when you're dealing with the Pan-African business, because oftentimes the bank that will accept money in Europe from gaming industry, from the gaming earnings from US or UK, will not accept the same revenue, say from Nigeria or from the Kenya. They just point blank say no as a policy. They always say that, well, gaming and gambling is a high risk industry as is, and then you add a layer of high risk, it's being Africa. The fact that Africa is genuinely considered as high risk, that's a separate point. I completely disagree with the whole FATCA and, whatever gray list, black list, and whatever they create. It's wholly inaccurate system, very nationalistic, very politically driven. And some of the countries on the list, they should not even be there. Somebody told me like Vanuatu, a tiny country, is on the blacklist. Why? You're only supposed to act to the blacklist countries and nations that pose economic and other issues for the European Union. How can a nation that is smaller than London, many times smaller than London, could create any kind of economic danger to the Western world? So it's just wholly inappropriate. The whole system should change, and there should be specific organizations, specific banks that should be on the blacklist or the grey list, not the countries. But the reality is such is that a lot of the African countries, a lot of them unjustifiably so, added to those lists, and because of that, Western banks, Western advisors, they just would not touch that kind of revenue coming from those countries. So I would also stress and put it to you that it's also important to find correct partners in the West that understand Africa, that are ready to work with it and able to navigate through the compliance requirements, and that they're just good businesses. So yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Sue. Very, very insightful points and very valid as well. Yes, especially given that most African gaming companies also have to deal with transactions, especially with the banks, financial transactions, paying their providers who are based, out of country. So yes, very valid that if you're going to if your strategy is to have Pan-African business, then you should also take into consideration these key points as well. Thank you so much for that. Now, I'm just going to go very quickly to the questions. We've got 3 questions. I think one of them is even seeking advice from the advisors on this call. So yes, I'll let you determine how you address this. The first question is, if you were advising an investor with a limited budget, which African markets would you prioritize over the next 3 years, and which would you avoid? Who wants to take that? Adenike, Zu, Garen?
Yeah, I've actually got no idea. The problem, of course, is we're not necessarily commercial advisors. As experienced lawyers, we become, we're often in commercial discussions, and what's going on around us is very commercially relevant for clients. But I actually don't know. I don't know where the opportunities are. It's a good question, but I'm not the right guy to answer it.
Exactly. Zu, do you want to try? Any comments on this one?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
So if you are advising an investor with a limited budget, which African market would you prioritize over the next 3 years? And which would you avoid?
Okay, I'm a lawyer, I'm not a commercial operator, but my personal view is I would definitely avoid mature markets like South Africa. That's a very expensive market to get into. The licensing requirements, the acquisition of the player, it's very, very expensive. The marketing, the advertising, it's mature. It's a big market with lots of competitors that's been around for a long time. I would probably go into less saturated markets, less, with less competition. That's number one. So whatever that is, there's lots of countries you'll need to do your research. Secondly, I would ensure that I have a strong local partner, because if you have a limited budget, you can't afford making mistakes. Hence, you need strong local partners, which is right on the topic that we're discussing today.
Exactly. And if you want more information, perhaps you should reach out, after this call. I'm sure you would get more information and insight than we can provide on this call. The second question, when evaluating local partners, what are the biggest red flags that could cause investors to walk away? I think Adenike kind of answered that already when she was addressing some of the factors that you should watch out for when looking for local partners, except any of the speaker has anything to add to this. Otherwise, we just move on to the next question. Right. Question 3, with regulation evolving rapidly across Africa, how can operators future-proof their business rather than simply complying with today's requirements? Oh, that's a very interesting question. In fact, I'm going to add on to that. And Garon, I'm coming to you, especially with the changes we're seeing, the new tax initiatives, especially trying to properly regulate the online market. There's been a lot of changes, suggestions, and many operators are pausing their expansion strategy, just watching and observing certain market. So some of this, with the evolving regulations, how can operators future-proof their business? Is it possible to future-proof your business?
I'm not convinced that it is. I mean, I think the reality is the world changes, and as time goes by, the world changes. The industry is peculiarly under attack at the moment. I think, in all the time that I've been in the industry, which is now 23 years, I mean, there've been occasions where we've seen it under attack. UAGA, when it came to the US, and when I was already in the industry, and UAGA caused a lot of trouble in the US, the gambling amendment legislation in Australia caused a lot of trouble, and it's the nature of the industry. There is only a degree to which you can future-proof it. I suppose, trying to predict what regulations and legislation will come is always tricky. Certainly across Africa, we will see increased player protection. We will see requirements. We will see, hopefully not as crazy as actually some of the European markets, because I think those are overkill. For example, affordability checks, very, very difficult to deal with. Restrictions on bonusing. Again, you have to be prepared that these things may happen, but you also have to think that perhaps it will be more reasonable, but plan for it happening. Advertising restrictions, particularly with sports sponsorships, which have become very popular, influencer advertising, which has become incredibly popular. You've got to expect that there will be pressure coming on those at some stage or another. But the biggest threat is tax, in my view. And as I think I said earlier, it is, in my view, the existential threat to the industry. Extraordinary taxes, which really are so high that they are punitive and very difficult for a lot of people to deal with, as opposed to something that is more balanced, more appropriate, and able to sustain an industry from an economic perspective. I mean, one has to expect that if there's change that one's not able to adapt to, and there always will be change, for some people that is going to be a problem, and for others that's going to create an opportunity. The question is that the vast majority of people or not? Now, I mean, some of the tax rates that are being proposed, and we'll have to see what happens, for example, in the UK, which is probably the best example of what happens when you effectively double the tax. Okay. the knock-on effect, of course, is the black market issue that most people, talk about as being the greatest danger. What the fiscuses do not tend to think about is that the more punitive the tax, the more you actually erode your tax base rather than increase your tax base. And look at player protection and issues of advertising and responsible gambling. If you're saying, well, like the South African Treasury did in one breath, we worried about the proliferation of problem gambling, and we want to introduce this tax to decrease that, as opposed to necessarily a pure fiscal raise. But the only thing you can predict is that there's going to be continued uncertainty, but the changes will come from those aspects, in my view. They're not going to come from necessarily a change in player behavior. Players want to bet, players want to gamble. Okay, and I think we all accept some portion of those players are problem gamblers, but the vast majority of gamblers or bettors are not problem gamblers or bettors and do not have a gambling or betting problem. But we have to recognize that there is a very genuine portion that do, but it is still by far the minority, not the majority. So the change in behavior is not going to come from players, really. The change is really regulatory and competition. Competition is normal. Competition will always happen. There will always be further entrants into the market. There will be others who drop off for various reasons. Can you accommodate for that? Can you think about that? Yes, that's part of, I would think, part of our strategic planning in any event. But the tax side, how you can plan for a margin that gets hit with a further 20% tax, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the planning scenario is for that. You have a limit. Okay, you can say, okay, we'll only have games where there is a worse RTP for players. We won't bonus. We're going to, cut down on AI may help in this to some degree. We'll cut down on people that we employ. We'll have smaller premises. Okay. And even if you do that, can you accommodate a tax rise of that sort of amount? Does it mean there's increased competition? Does it mean there's less competition? I don't know the answer to those questions, but I'm not sure how you accommodate for a potential material adverse change. That's the thing. There are changes that are not material, or we'll deal with it. It's crap, but we'll deal with it and get on with it. Okay? Yes. There are changes that are so material that they are potentially destructive to the business. I don't know how you plan for that. And the tax side for me is, and we've seen it across the territories. And we're seeing it across the world. That's the greatest danger. That's what hits the numbers more than anything else. Mm-hmm. Increased taxes.
May I add?
Yeah, go ahead.
I totally agree with what Garen said. You can't plan future-proof against certain changes because you just don't know what will be the wind of change. I think the things you could probably future-proof and plan is the internal governances, the contracts you have with your partners, with your employees, to protect your business from any claims or any dispute or misunderstanding from your partners. That also oftentimes people get so focused on big things like the tax and they miss the obvious little things. Those things you probably can through stronger contracts, through clearer terms in your agreement, which more often is the biggest threat to the business than something external. And the second, I would say, always my recommendation, because I do the structural planning, I always recommend to clients, don't just think about each region, think about where your group is heading towards. What is your plan? Do you want to sell in 5 years' time and have a nice early retirement, or do you want to list on London Stock Exchange, because they're two very different future-proofing and planning strategies completely. If you plan to list on London Stock Exchange, it means you have to have very high compliance and regulatory standards across the board, even in jurisdictions that may not require it locally. You must have one because you're preparing your group for IPO. If it's just a sale, it's very different requirements. Then you have to make more focus on the tax, double tax treaties, how you get your money out of the country, how you invest the money in the country, because private investors or angel investors or PE funds, they're more interested on that side. So it's very tailored, very nuanced, depends on what's your group size, whoever's asking the question.
Thank you so much for that, Sue and Garon and Adenike, and thank you to everyone who's here, who has stayed on the call, who joined the conversation, to those who also put in their question. We appreciate you for your time. I know everyone's time is very precious, especially on a day like this. It's the end of the week. With that, we have come to the end of today's session, and indeed it has been a rich conversation. There's been a lot of takeaways from this session. Primarily, you still need advisors. Whatever the challenge, the present, the future may hold, your advisors, if you've got the right advisors, more than likely you will navigate it successfully, and then you'll be able to structure your business in such a way that it is sustainable. A very big thank you to Garon, to Zoo, to Adenike for your contribution. It has been immensely enlightening. To everyone who joined and those who sent in question, thank you for making this an engaging session. Now, this session is recorded, and we will be releasing that. We'll be uploading that and sending it to our to everyone who has attended the session, just in case you need to go over it again and get a few nuggets here and there. Before we close, a quick note: we have this webinars monthly. The next one would be in August, and then we will be talking to the trade associations, their impact, their value in the gaming industry. So watch out for that. Follow our pages, and yes, make sure you register to join. It is free. These webinars are completely free. So on behalf of myself and the SLEC Africa team, thank you all again, and we hope you walk away with a clearer sense of what it takes to choose the right partners and not just focus on license.